Hey friends, Sam Haymart for Test Driven TV. We've got something a little different here. We've got two test drives that we've done on the Mustang EcoBoost as well as the all-new 2016 Camaro RS V6. And we decided to take these two test drives and put them together and do a bit of a face-off here. Now, before you start commenting and going nuts on me for comparing the wrong two cars, let me give you the rationale behind why it is we're comparing the EcoBoost 4-cylinder Mustang to the V6 Camaro. And it's simply this: if you go to Ford and Chevrolet and ask them, give us the performance non-V8 car, these are the cars they're going to give us. These are the cars they're going to give you, because the V6 Mustang is a base model. It's a rental car for all intents. It's a loss leader when it comes to pricing for the ad specials in your paper. They don't offer it with premium trim. They don't offer it with premium performance options. So if you ask Ford for a performance Mustang without a V8, they're going to give you an EcoBoost Mustang. If you go to Chevy and ask for the same thing, they're giving you a V6 Camaro. So given that they're the closest in performance metrics, that's why we're comparing them. So let's get at it. The 2015 Mustang was the long-awaited replacement for the last generation pony car, which had been around since 2005. While rumored it was going to lose the retro look and get vastly more modern and perhaps change for global tastes, that isn't what happened at all. Instead, what arrived was a more modern take on the retro style that's made the Mustang an icon in the first place. It's gotten some ribbing for looking like a Fusion coupe, and that's a fair criticism. Luckily, most agree the Fusion itself isn't a bad-looking car. The 2015 Mustang is fractionally smaller than the one it replaces, losing nearly 2 inches in width and an inch in height. Overall, though, it looks and feels just as much a tank as it's always been, and in the process, it actually gained some weight. Our tester here came with the EcoBoost Performance package, which brings the glossy black 19-inch wheels and summer rubber. The package also deletes the rear spoiler, but you can option to put it back on. Not sure why they configured it that way. The 2016 Chevrolet Camaro arrives this year all new from the ground up, though it remarkably comes across nearly identical in styling and character to last year's model. Make no mistake though, this new Camaro's been to the gym and is now more fit than both of its competitors Mustang and Challenger. It comes a bit smaller this year with a wheelbase of 110 inches, shorter by just 2, just like its length, now 188 inches. It's an inch lower to the ground and an inch narrower too. Most important, this one you see here weighs almost 300 pounds lighter than last year's comparable model. Our tester here is a red hot, that's the color, I'm not editorializing, a red hot 2LT with the optional 3.6 liter V6 and the RS package. That gives it these larger 20-inch alloy wheels with run-flat tires, and the package also upgrades you to the HID headlights and has unique front grills. At the back, the RS gets a rear deck spoiler and LED tail lamps too. Our tester also had the dual-mode exhaust system, which has some healthy-looking exhaust tips and a sound that we'll get to here in a couple of minutes. Altogether, it really comes together very easy on the eyes, to say the least. Inside the 2015 Mustang is where this pony rides like nothing that's come before it. Our premium trim grade cabin was further enhanced with the Premier Trim and Accent group. This added improved trims on the door panels and dash, red accent stitching, and special turned aluminum paneling. Ours was also optioned with the Recaro leather seats, which are manual in adjustment. They raise the standard of grip on your body for those who really plan to take their car out hunting, but come at a cost which we'll get to in a moment. The rear seat is but a check mark on a spec sheet. Like most Mustangs that have come before this one, it's for small kids at best. If you plan to force your workmates in there to drive them to lunch one day, they're going to want to drive themselves next time. Looking down the console and up onto the center stack, it's a pleasant thing as it's very well conceived. Ford had said the design was aircraft inspired. Not sure what that means here, but it looks good and the controls are very well laid out. The extra gauges with the performance package are a nice touch too. With the premium trim grade, you get the full-size touchscreen infotainment system with My Ford Touch. That system is replaced for 2016 with Sync 3, which promises to be better. Here, we also had the Shaker Pro audio system and the voice-activated navigation optioned. The audio system is good overall, but not audiophile material. It gets loud, but can be thrashy at volume. There's a small place on the center console to put your smartphone and both a USB and auxiliary port to go along with Bluetooth connectivity. The instrument cluster's design reaches into 1967 but has a nice modern center screen to make that all okay. The steering wheel's a nice piece too, with more controls crammed into it than most automakers would dare. It works well though, and it's easy to navigate for infotainment as well as the instrument cluster information display. The interior of the 2LT is on the higher side of the trim grades with heated and ventilated leather seats up front, both power operated. Leather also wraps the shift lever in the steering wheel, though that's all but expected anymore. The center stack is simplified over the last generation with a large touchscreen audio and infotainment system front and center. Here it has the top-end Bose audio with MyLink and Apple CarPlay capabilities, and OnStar 4G LTE Wi-Fi services are available. I like that it retains hard controls like a volume knob and other routinely used functions. Below it are HVAC controls that are simply laid out with large vent rings innovatively doubling as your temperature controls. You just turn them right or left for hot or cold. It's brilliant! The last big thing as we move down the console is that an electric parking brake now takes place of the large and in-the-way lever. This cleans up the space and makes for a better layout for cup holders, though there's still no place for a smartphone to lay, and the center console storage still is minimal.
I have to say this is truly the best Mustang interior I've ever seen. The fit and finish is good, the design is good, the technology's great. It's just very well done, but we need to have a conversation about these Recaro seats. Make sure you sit in them, make sure you fit in them. If you're over 200 pounds, they just don't fit. I've been a pretty heavy guy before and I've tried to sit in these seats. It just doesn't work. Now right now, I'm 5'10", I'm 165, and I still find them pretty snug, especially right here in the rib cage. They really grab you tight like a fist. Now, the other thing to consider also is you give up the power adjustment features, you give up the heating and the cooling that come with the standard seats. So just a word of caution there. They're not for everybody. They can be very good if you're going to track the car. I'd probably get them myself, but if this were going to be a daily driver for me, I'd definitely stick with the stock seats.
The trunk is still plenty large for a sports coupe, and those rear seats will fold down in case you want to put larger things in. The opening, however, seems to have gotten smaller than it used to be, something Mustang guys cannot make fun of the Camaro about anymore. If you option the Shaker audio system, make room for its subwoofer as it lives back here. And lastly, under the trunk floor is an emergency inflator instead of a spare tire, which is fine if you have a slow leak, bad if you chop your tire open on a curb. A mini spare can be optioned for $195.
Overall, I really like the design of this interior. It's very simple and very clean. It's not really busy like the Mustang, and I don't mean busy in a bad way. The Mustang, I like the design of it. It's very retro, but this just has a nice clean look to it that's simple, and I like simple. Now, one thing I will point out is the outward visibility. That's something that is a big concern with a lot of people because I read it in comments, and of course, the old Camaro was never really praised for its good outward visibility. And here, I mean, look at this. I can span my hand from the top of the windshield to the dash, and I can almost do the same thing over here. It's that low. It's like a gun sight. But the good thing is, they've somehow managed the seating position here such that you can see out very well. Now, these mirrors, they're a little bit small, but they are also in the Mustang. In fact, the Mustang, I think, a little bit smaller. But you can see out very well, and of course, backing up, the backup camera works exceptionally well, so that really doesn't seem to be a problem here. I will say that I really do like the view over the hood here. The shape of the hood is very much like the Corvette, although not quite as contoured. But this seating position and the overall feel sitting in here with the low roof, it actually is not that dissimilar from the Corvette.
Overall, the interior was comfortable in spite of it being slightly smaller, at least up front where the seats had excellent adjustment range and were supportive and good for long drives. The rear seat, like its competitors, is for emergencies or small pets though. And the trunk space is reasonably good, but like before, the opening is very small, so you won't be getting a lot of large things in and out. You certainly don't need to worry about lugging a spare tire in and out, as there isn't one, and if you wanted a spare, there really isn't room for it either. Under the hood is where all the attention's been for this car, the first turbocharged four-cylinder engine in a Mustang for decades. The 2.3-liter direct-injected EcoBoost 4 delivers up an impressive Ford-size 310 horsepower and 320 pound-feet of torque. It's available with both the 6-speed automatic and 6-speed manual transmission, which is what our tester came equipped with. I've tested both transmissions before, and in my opinion, the manual is the best for this engine.
So there's no question that this EcoBoost engine offers up some horsepower. It actually is fast enough that you can call it quick. And of course, it is very comparable with what you would get with the V6. But with this engine, you get a little bit more of a sporting character, and you can get better fuel economy.
And fuel economy was the catch here. The EPA rates the 2015 Mustang EcoBoost at 22 mpg city, 31 mpg highway, and 26 mpg combined. In my week with it, I worked hard to reach 21 mpg combined on its required premium fuel. If there's any downside with the EcoBoost aside its thirst, it's that it can display higher than desirable levels of noise, vibration, and harshness at idle and in mid-range acceleration. While I would have loved to drive the SS with a 6.2-liter V8, under the hood of ours was the new for 2016 3.6-liter direct-injected V6. The same engine found under the hood of the Cadillac ATS and other GM vehicles. Here, it has 335 horsepower and 284 pound-feet of torque.
Here we go. Can you hear that? This has the dual mode exhaust system. $895. It's a little bit louder, and it really sings when you turn this thing up because it has a flapper in the exhaust that really opens it up when you really get into it. So let's see what that's all about. Woo, that's 7,000 RPM, baby. That is quite some sound. And it just loves it. It loves this stuff, man. How many V6s out there can you say just love to be throttled like this? Not very many, and especially not the Mustang, not the Challenger. Those V6s are rental car grade. Rental car grade. This isn't. And the power this thing has, not a lot of torque, you got to really wind it, but you love to because it sounds so good doing it. And this exhaust, woo! This exhaust system has such a nice growl from back there. You got to try it.
As to acceleration, I didn't get to do instrumented tests, but Chevrolet says 5.1 seconds to 60 miles an hour, which is backed up by many other media outlets and my seat of the pants. It's not as fast as the V8, obviously, but most won't be all that disappointed with its fun factor. Fuel economy for the V6 and the manual transmission is rated by the EPA at 18 mpg city, 27 mpg highway, and 21 mpg combined. I easily achieved 22 mpg in my daily drive cycle of city and highway. This is of course before the video shoot where, as you can imagine, it plummeted like a rock. The chassis is the sea change that most Mustang aficionados are talking about. For decades past its prime, the Mustang had that solid rear axle which everyone except the bean counters at Ford and drag racers cussed. The modernist finally went out and gave us a proper independent rear suspension. In the move, the Mustang also got a dual ball joint suspension up front, which gives it more room for larger brakes, but also dials in more favorable variations in caster and camber when turning in, which net improved grip and steering feel.
One of the very first things I wanted to do when I got this car was go straight to the Apache Trail, which is one of my favorite mountain roads because this one is rough. It's a great place to test these cars and see how well the suspension handles less than smooth pavement. And this is important for the Mustang because it used to always have a solid rear axle, and well, to me that's always been akin to bringing combat boots to a dance, especially when you're trying to enjoy a back road that isn't perfect like a racetrack in terms of smoothness. So what would always happen with the solid axle or the live axle is on these tight corners with rough pavement, that axle would dance and skate. It would just be all roobly-boo all over the place. Never any fun. And what I'm finding out is as I power out of some of these tight, rough curves, it's just got a nice plant, a nice grip, and that's something completely new for the Mustang. Completely new. The other benefit to this tight, rough road is I also get to see how well sorted the steering is here. A lot of times when I bring a car up here, I get kickback through the steering. I get a little bit of rattling in the steering column. Sometimes the suspension even rattles, and I'm glad to say that's not happening here. It is a bit rough, obviously, and I'm getting a few rattles and shakes around here, but when it comes to the steering and the suspension, it is tight as can be. Now that I'm on the more smoother portions of my favorite mountain road here, I have to say this car is a pure joy. This thing handles so well. It's so refined. It really is exactly what Mustang enthusiasts for decades have tried to achieve by modifying their cars with suspension kits, expensive shocks, better springs, roll bars, even in some cases putting an independent suspension in their cars. A retrofit. This is what they've been trying to get to. This is a car that, while it isn't a BMW 3 Series, I really think that it offers up the same kind of finesse, the same kind of grip and agility up here on a windy mountain road that, well, that those cars have always been known for. It's got a light flingability. The steering has just an absolutely wonderful feel to it, and you can adjust the steering. You can go mild, medium, all the way up to a stiff sport track style.
The 2015 Mustang also comes with a drive mode selector which allows for normal, sport, track, and snow settings. Modes change up the steering feel along with throttle input, transmission shifting with automatics, and the stability and traction control settings. All these are differences you can feel. The performance package had larger brakes and quite stiff settings for the springs and shocks to go along with the summer tires. It rode rough and could be harsh, but overall, as I said, it's truly one of the best yet under a Mustang.
What's really nice about this chassis is how nimble it feels. I mean, it feels considerably lighter, tighter, and more flingable than the last generation Camaro. And when you compare it to the Mustang and the Challenger, both of which feel like big, heavy muscle cars, this is decidedly different. It just has a lighter, more agile feel that, dare I say it, almost falls into the realm of the BMW 4 Series. It really likes just to be laid into a corner here, and it just has a level of refinement and tightness that the Mustang and the Challenger don't. And they both handle very well, but when you're in them, you know you're driving big, heavy tanks. And this just has a very nice predictability at the limit too. Even here on public roads, and I'm not really going that fast, you can really push into the adhesion levels of these tires. And it's just got a great feel to it. Woo! Nice. And one thing I do need to point out is, while I praise this as being very precise, very agile, all of those wonderful characteristics that associate it with cars more expensive, it should have those characteristics. After all, this does share the same platform with the Cadillac ATS, which does compete with all those more expensive cars. But I think there is one area where its price point is reflected, and that is that there's a little bit more road noise here. The sound deadening isn't quite as thick, and some of the road imperfections, some of the noise, the tire noise, the suspension noise comes through a little bit stronger than it does with the Cadillac ATS. So that's a noticeable thing.
Most of the handling goodness I'm going on about is really attributable to its lighter and trimmer chassis, but its hardware, like a dual ball joint front suspension, variable ratio steering, and a multi-link independent rear suspension, all do their part. While it's worth noting that the SS is available with the magnetic ride control adjustable dampers, I really thought that you get it one way or the highway tune of this car was dead nuts on the money. Quality feels a metric that, like most of our scoring, can be subjective. That said, in our week with the Mustang, a number of body fit and alignment gaps were seen, and the interior had its share of intermittent rattles and squeaks. When it comes to overall quality, I have to say I'm impressed. Being a longtime Ford guy at heart, I looked hard for things to pick on here, but honestly, I really just couldn't find much. Body and panel fit lines are very good, and all through the night, not a rattle or squeak could be heard.
All right, so I guess you're wondering which one I say wins the face-off. Well, I'm not going to say. You guys are going to pretty much figure it out down there below in the comments, but I will tell you this. In our individual test drives of each car, which you can find the links to down below, far more detailed test reviews for each, the Camaro came out with 4.5 stars out of 5, and the Mustang came out with 4. The Mustang had a few quality issues, and just some of the other metrics weren't quite as high as they were with the Camaro. The other thing is, we have our I'd buy it list here at Test Driven TV, which means if I like the car well enough to buy it, I would. It goes on the list. The Camaro made it to that list, and the Mustang didn't. So that's about as much as I can say. I think you probably figured out what I think. So there it is. If you still don't hate me and Test Driven TV, click on the link right here and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We test drive 1, sometimes 2 vehicles every week. Plus, we have a new video just like this one almost every day. There's always something new. So stay tuned.